So today I'm going to read out of It Happened in Colorado, a story about the blazing of the Goodnight Loving Trail. And this was in 1866. And it's about the cattle drives, and it has to do with Colorado history. In 1869, Charles Goodnight made an important decision. A Texas rancher and trail driver, he was already widely known among cattlemen as a partner of Oliver Loving, one of the first men to bring Texas longhorns into Colorado territory. But Loving had died the previous year, and now Goodnight decided to leave Texas and try his hand at organizing a ranch in southern Colorado. As he stood on the banks of the Arkansas River west of Pueblo, he was amazed at the absolute beauty of the spot. Here, among canyons lined with cottonwoods and box elders, he would build a herd the likes of which Colorado had never seen before. The range, watered by the melted snows of the nearby Rocky Mountains, was lush, and Goodnight's business sense told him that the thousands of cattle he would raise here would yield rich rewards when the railroad got as far as Denver. Goodnight was just the man to build such a ranch. He had been born the day before the Alamo fell in March 1836 in a far-off Illinois. He moved to Texas as a lad and helped out on the poor farm that his stepfather had left Illinois to obtain. Upon reaching adulthood, Goodnight became a scout and independent ranger. But at the same time, he continued learning about the vast herds of Texas longhorn cattle that seemed to be everywhere. During the Civil War, Goodnight served the Confederacy in Texas as a ranger, keeping peace with the Comanches along the frontier. When the war was over, hundreds of Texas farmers and ranchers put down their weapons and returned home to find their spreads ruined by neglect. And they found that the longhorns, in the absence of care, had multiplied manyfold and were overgrazing much of the sparse range. Clearly, someone needed to devise a way to market the cattle. Even before a man named Joseph McCoy dreamed of driving Texas cattle northeastward to the newly founded railhead town of Abilene, Kansas, Goodnight and Loving were playing with the idea of driving the herd westward into New Mexico, then northward to Denver, Colorado territory. In 1866, the two men got a sizable herd together and started west toward the Pecos River. They crossed the stream and proceeded to Fort Sumner, New Mexico territory. After selling some of the cattle there, Goodnight returned to Texas to round up a new herd, while Loving continued on to Denver. There he sold the rest of the herd to John W. Iliff. The trail the two partners had carved from Fort Belknap, Texas, to Denver became known as the Goodnight Loving Trail. The following year, Loving was severely wounded by Comanche Indians as the partners moved another herd along their trail. He died at Fort Sumner, but Goodnight went on and delivered the cattle to their buyers. On his way back through Fort Sumner, he had his partner's body exhumed and laid in a crudely made metal coffin. Goodnight placed the coffin in a wagon and drove it back to Texas for a proper burial, thus fulfilling his friend's deathbed wish. After Goodnight returned to Colorado in 1869 to establish his ranch along the Arkansas River, success came rapidly. He now felt secure enough to take a wife, and the following year he went back east to marry his Tennessee-born sweetheart, Mary Ann Dyer. He brought his new bride back to Colorado, where he expected they would spend the rest of their lives together. Goodnight became active in the community of Pueblo. He was an organizer of the town's first bank, the Stock Growers Bank of Pueblo. The future seemed bright for Goodnight and his fellow ranchers in southern Colorado, but in reality, the nation was on the brink of one of the worst depressions ever to hit North America, the Panic of 1873. Goodnight and his neighbors hit rock bottom, and Goodnight later lamented that the panic wiped me off the face of the earth. By 1876, Goodnight's good life in Colorado was over. He took his wife and what few cattle he still owned and went back to Texas. There in the Palo Duro Canyon, Goodnight established a new ranch. Over the next few years, he was instrumental in developing and breeding new strains of domestic cattle. With an Irish immigrant named John Adair, he helped amass almost 1 million acres, which supported nearly 100,000 head of cattle. The J.A. Ranch rapidly became one of the largest and most famous spreads in all of North America. After Adair died, Goodnight decided to slow down and divide the J.A. with Mrs. Adair. "I am heartily sick of men and ranches," he wrote her, but he still maintained more than 100,000 acres upon which he raised cattle and some buffalo. Goodnight and his wife were the founders in 1898 of Goodnight College, as well as the organizers of 2 churches in West Texas. Mary Ann Goodnight died in 1926, and Charles followed in 1929. Texas lays claim to Charles Goodnight, and with his fame as part owner of the magnificent J.A. Ranch, maybe rightly so. But before he was a rancher in Texas, he was a Coloradan, and he and his spread near Pueblo were known far and wide. As his noted biographer J. Everett Haley once put it, Goodnight's force, his fearlessness, his plainscraft, and his mental vigor will be remembered throughout the West as long as the story of cattle and horses intrigues the fancy of men. Again, the Goodnight Loving Trail from It Happened in Colorado.